Hey, what's up everybody? Hope you're having a great day. My name is Jay and you're watching Clouded Reactions. Wasn't expecting that. Wasn't expecting a little tearjerker. It didn't take over me too much though. I got a little weak. I ain't gonna lie, I did kind of hide my head a little bit. I gotta work on that. I just can't cry in front of people. I refuse to do it. But I know it's part of the reaction process, so I do gotta get over that eventually. But until I get over it, let's go ahead and hop into the history video part. This is a two-parter, so I don't know how I'm gonna do this. I don't know if I'm gonna just merge both my reaction videos into one video or make two separate videos and just release them back to back. I don't know how I'm gonna do it yet. I don't know, can't talk. Anyways, you know how it goes. We keep these intros short and sweet over here, especially when it comes to the history videos. So let's just hop right on in.
I'm Indy Nidell.
And I'm Joakim from Sabaton.
And this is Sabaton History. Now, this song is going to be covered in 2 episodes, so I can cover 2 aspects of the topic. Gallipoli. For 8 months in 1915, that name was headline news worldwide.
And our song, Cliffs of Gallipoli, is a tribute to the men who fought and died there.
The Great War was just a half-year old, but casualties had already risen to unthinkable levels. British soldiers were dying by the tens of thousands in the bloody stalemate on the Western Front. Leading politicians began looking for an alternative to the slaughter in the trenches. Most vocal among them were Lord Kitchener, Secretary of State for War, and Winston Churchill, First Lord of the Admiralty, who thought that instead of trying to beat the Germans in Flanders, they should strike towards the weakest link of the Central Powers, the Ottoman Empire. They believed the Ottoman military to be second-rate, more of a nuisance than an equal. Churchill envisioned a strike against Constantinople itself by sea. Taking the Turkish capital would drive the Ottomans out of the war and open up a direct shipping route towards Britain's Russian ally. Indirectly, it would safeguard British interests in Mesopotamia and Suez as well. So on paper, this seemed like a total win-win for the Allies. A major reason for the British hubris was the recent military record of the Ottoman Empire. Serious defeats during the Balkan Wars and the recent catastrophic outcome of the Battle of Sarikamish just weeks ago, where tens of thousands of soldiers froze to death in the Caucasus Mountains, painted a picture of incompetent leaders and a badly equipped and trained Ottoman military. The sick man at the Bosporus would be no match for the professional British soldiers. There was, however,
They were severely underestimated.
a major obstacle along the way. To strike against Constantinople, any Allied fleet would have to penetrate the Straits of the Dardanelles that guard the entrance to the Sea of Marmara. And those straits were narrow and had been a natural line of defense for centuries. And the sick man was not as sick as the British believed. Since the Balkan Wars, the defenses of the straits had been continually improved and ammunition restocked. In addition to long-range guns, the Ottomans had mobile 120mm howitzer batteries on the ready, highly trained troops, and line after line of mines in the waters. Under Çanakkale Fortified Area Command of General Fahri Pasha, the Dardanelles became the most fortified area of the whole Ottoman Empire.
I remember intelligence on the Allied part was an issue too. I don't think we had the right intelligence. I wonder if we didn't know none of this going in, the Allies. I wonder how ill prepared they really were. Or am I messing that up? Am I getting that wrong? Pretty sure they were ill prepared, like ill advised intelligence wise.
The British and French fleets tried to force passage through the straits. Even a modern warship can be sunk by a single mine though. And after disaster on March 18, 1915, when the Ottomans sank 3 Allied battleships and severely damaged 3 more, the Allies had to rethink.
Hear them whisper, voices from the other side. Hear them calling, for my foes no friends are resting side by side.
Dang, hearing it now I feel like listening to it again.
The artillery positions on the hills had to be taken out first by land if the operation towards Constantinople was to succeed. The task was given to General Sir Ian Hamilton, in overall command of the Mediterranean Expeditionary Force. The MEF included, along with British units, the ANZAC, Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, under General
ANZAC, that's the day I was talking about earlier. Okay.
Along with British units, the ANZAC, Australian and New Zealand Army Corps under General Sir William Birdwood. Anzac had been heading for Britain before being diverted to Egypt. Instead of fighting Germans, they would now fight the Ottomans. The Australians, New Zealanders, and Maoris of Anzac considered themselves natural soldiers, men hardened by daily outdoor activity, and the aggressive and unruly character of the Anzacs seemed perfect for the task ahead. The MEF was further strengthened by an Indian brigade and the Gurkha Rifles, who joined the Anzacs and a French force at Malta in early March. The French government was not too keen on the whole endeavor, but they themselves had their own ambitions in the Middle East and could not simply leave it all to the British if they succeeded in toppling the Ottomans. The French created the 1st Division Corps Expéditionnaire d'Orient, made up of regular French troops, the French Foreign Legion, and Senegalese and Zouave forces. Once again, though, the planning phase betrayed the arrogance of British high command. While generals on the western or eastern fronts made plans for all sorts of eventualities and for a quick exit if everything suddenly went to hell, nothing of the sort was prepared for the Gallipoli landings. Instead, Hamilton's plan was overambitious and it had one critical flaw. It all depended on the Ottoman inability to stand up to the invaders. But what if they did not turn and run and instead stood and fought? The German influence over the Ottoman forces was personified by General Otto Liman von Sanders in command of the 5th Army at Gallipoli. Ever since the naval attacks, it was thought that an invasion might take place. And the British did little to hide their intentions. In fact, the Greek newspapers ran headlines about the coming landings. But the Gallipoli Peninsula was large, and the Ottoman forces could not guard every beach. Von Sanders decided to put only a screening force as a tripwire defense close to the beaches and keep most of his men in reserve units further back. Ottoman officers at the front would assess the situation and send in reinforcements where necessary. One such officer was Lieutenant Colonel Mustafa Kemal, in command of the Ottoman 19th Division. He was familiar with the defenses, and his troops were well-trained, motivated, and equipped. In fact, with the help of German instructors and weapon supplies, it was quite a formidable fighting force. The landings began the night of April 25th. The Anzacs would land on the west of the peninsula at a place called Gaba Tepe, later known as Anzac Cove. They would build a bridgehead and advance.
So is it called Anzac? Okay, I thought it was called Anzac Cove before the landing. But they were just talking about earlier how the New Zealander and the Australian forces were named Anzac. So I guess they named it Anzac Cove up, based off of the soldiers. I guess I had that backwards.
Called Gaba Tepe, later known as Anzac Cove. They would build a bridgehead and advance the next day all the way to the heights of Maltepe. The other British troops would land at the tip of the peninsula, Cape Helles, and then take Achibaba and the Kilid Bar Plateau in one fell swoop. After that, they would simply join forces and push the Ottomans from the heights. There were also several diversionary landings around the flanks, with the French landing on the Asian side of the straits at Comcale. Illuminated by the moon, the Anzac landing craft made their way towards their destination, fighting the strong currents. The beaches were in darkness and all was still, and hopes were high that they would fully surprise the enemy. But as soon as they made ground, the first bullets crashed into the boats. A concert of rapid rifle fire erupted, and the battle for Gallipoli had begun. Anzac was not even facing an entire battalion, but the sudden fire caused confusion as the first casualties began to litter the beaches. As more and more Anzacs landed, the outnumbered Ottomans retreated to higher ground and into prepared trenches. And as the sun rose, they fired freely into the mass of men on the beaches. The Anzacs,
Literally like shooting fish in a barrel. They're just so compact. It's even if you missed your target, it's gonna hit someone else.
been ordered not to load their rifles. Massive men on the beaches. The Anzacs had been ordered not to load their rifles and instead rushed up the hill, bayonets fixed. But in the dim morning, it was hard to navigate the steep heights and the thorny undergrowth, and the Ottomans fired and retreated further. The Anzacs were soon left out in the open, trying to make sense of the rough terrain, climbing the high ridges, running through razor-sharp thorns and over slippery stones, soon left the men exhausted, and many fell, to accurate Ottoman sniper fire. The maps were totally inadequate, and the officers still standing were overwhelmed by the situation. The Ottomans themselves retreated towards the heights of Çanakkale. From the high ground, they could direct artillery fire onto the beaches. Mustafa Kemal was among the first to understand that the landings at Anzac Cove were not a diversion, but were the real deal. He ordered his division to Sari Bair, the highest point on the peninsula. But while he himself was trying to get a better view of the situation, he saw exhausted men flooding back from the fighting. Upon ordering them to stop, they declared that the Anzacs were moving up and they themselves had no ammunition left. While Kemal's orderlies were running back to get the division moving, he ordered the men he'd halted to fix their bayonets and turn back to attack with the now famous words, "I don't order you to attack, I order you to die. In the time which passes until we die, other troops and commanders can take our place."
Hell is waiting where the ocean meets the sand. Cliffs of burden where the soldiers rushed into today.
The pursuing Anzacs were totally caught off guard by the sudden counterattack. Fearing that Ottoman reserves had already arrived, they pulled back. Everywhere around Anzac Cove, the Ottoman resistance began to stiffen. Attempts to cross the ridges were immediately met with heavy fire from an unseen enemy. The invaders were stuck. At Helles, the situation was even worse. Way worse. This was an obvious landing site, and the Ottoman defenders had prepared thoroughly. As the Allied landing craft closed in on the beaches, they were met with a deadly hail of bullets. Many men were hit before they could make landing. Others panicked and jumped into the water. Many of those drowned, dragged down by their heavy kit. But those that made it out of the boats met belts of barbed wire guarding the beach, trapping them in the open. Soon, bodies littered the beach, and the waves washed ashore blood red. The men lucky enough to make it through huddled down behind a sandbank. At just 5 feet high, around 1.5 meters, it was the only cover available. Again, there were only a few Ottoman platoons defending the area, but they had fortified trenches and knew how to use their rifles and field artillery to deadly effect. The British officers could only watch as the landing crafts were blown to pieces. The men at Helles were trapped. Similar scenes happened at the other landing places. Y Beach was shot to pieces, while the attacks on X and S broke down the same way as the main landings without major results. Often forgotten by the history books is the French landing at Kum Kale, the only semi-victory that day. That force, under General Albert d'Amada, was to silence the Ottoman guns on the Asian side of the straits and divert Ottoman troops. Their actual landing was nearly unopposed, but the overall Ottoman forces facing them were far more numerous than on the European side. Fighting for the tiny town lasted all day, but the vicious close-quarter combat was for naught. The invasion plan had failed. And as darkness fell, it came as a relief. For the exhausted Ottomans, it was time to fall back and reorganize and wait for the reserves. For the Allies, the cover of night was a saving grace. Finally, they could make a move. Men could come ashore, the injured could be tended to, and fresh officers could take charge. The wounded flooded back to the medical ships. But the doctors and nurses were not prepared for the amount of casualties. There was not enough room. There was not enough morphine. And even if a wounded man survived, it was still a journey of 600 miles, 1,000 kilometers, back to Alexandria to recuperate. And so the first day of Gallipoli came to an end. But the campaign had only just begun.
How many wasted lives? How many dreams did fade away? Broken promises, they won't be coming home.
So, Joachim, tell us a little bit about the musical side of Cliffs of Gallipoli. Well, that's a good question, Joachim, because it's actually a song that took a long time to write. I started writing it in 2006, and it's actually one of those projects. Sometimes you start writing a song, and it takes a while before you get it done or finish it. But in many cases, it's been lying dormant. You haven't been working actively on it. In the case here, though, I think I constantly wrote on that song almost every day for 2 years.
Like, okay, so the finished released version, does it sound very different from when it came out?
Oh, Yes and no. I mean, I don't know how many songs. I mean, all the parts that were taken away for that song probably could consist of 2 more songs in it. You know?
Wow.
Same thing for Bismarck, actually. It's probably 3 songs worth of writing in there. It didn't take as long, though. But with Cliffs of Gallipoli, I just felt that I had something special going on. And it's not a typical sound. Well, you know, you get these, you fall in love with some of your projects a little bit more. Right. And sometimes a little bit too much. This is one of those cases. I really felt it was something I wanted to make perfect, as good as I could. And for once, I actually think I couldn't have done it better. Probably sounds good, but at least I could.
I heard from somebody, I forgot, it was a while back, I read the comments saying that I guess they have an ongoing joke where like the next album they're going to branch out to another type of genre. And that's, it just reminded me when I heard that, I'm like, oh, I haven't heard that connection, that continuity of like an insider joke in a while.
So on your second album, Great War Part 2, that's going to come out, your 90s R&B album that comes out in 2020,
Yes.
that's going to have Shores of Gallipoli on it.
Yes, a trap beat. Cool, man.
All right.
Trap beat.
Well, I think we've all learned something today.
What does Joachim know about trap beats, man?
Thank you very much, Joachim.
Thank you for having me.
Crazy.
We'll see you next time.
Wipe your tears, your sons will rest a million years. Found their peace at last, as hope turn to friend and forget. And they knew to die.
This version that they're playing is a lot clearer than the one I saw. It wouldn't buffer. I think that's how the video was uploaded, but I'm seeing this one and it's playing just fine. Look how clean that looks. Well, not right there. Man, that guy's looking all kinds of crazy right there.
All right, and here's some cool stuff going. We're gonna do our older albums with the History Channel editions. That's got indie speaking. It's cool as... I can't say that word. Anyway, you should become a patron because then you can get that stuff. See you soon.
Okay, so it's interesting that he said that he's going to cut it into 2 parts to cover both aspects of the song. So I guess the first part is maybe about the war aspect, about what actually took place. And then maybe the second part, I don't know what the second part's going to be about. Makes no sense. I really want to jump into the second part, and I want to do a little bit of talking. So hope you guys enjoy the reaction. I always enjoy the videos, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.